It's a rare occurrence, and I think a stroke of luck, to persuade a representative of the Soros Foundation to take part in the public debate. What made it possible was the fact that we both came from the USSR, long time ago, 50 years to be exact. Both served in the Israeli army, both live in the United States now, and we both were invited to speak on today's pressing issues by Radio Vera in Vancouver, Canada. So, who are we? My opponent is Alexander Goldfarb, in the past the head of the Moscow branch of the George Soros Foundation, professor, author of several widely discussed books, and a close friend of famous or infamous Russian oligarch Boris Berezovsky, whose Civil Liberties Foundation he once headed. As for your humble servant, I must admit that I am a less known figure than Professor Goldfarb. Wikipedia even refused to publish my page explaining that being a member of the executive committee of the Libertarian Party and the author of a few books on political economy, such as Capitalism 101, for example, does not warrant inclusion, especially given my disgusting pro-Trump stance. I turn out to be unworthy of mention in the noblest and most honest Talmud of them all. As the saying goes, one spoonful of tar can spoil a barrel of honey. Honey, my left knee. Especially as far as I understood, Vicky didn't like the fact that Sarah Palin, Marsha Blackburn, Rudy Giuliani, and several other despicable human beings, read Republicans, expressed interest and even love for my semi-fiction, semi-historical evidence books. They're fun, but this is the opinion of mere 500,000 readers.
Kirill Solovyov. Good morning. And once again, I want to extend my enormous gratitude to you for finding the time and, most importantly, the desire and the opportunity to participate.
The participant has a question, if possible.
Certainly, please go ahead.
You know, I'm not sure about everyone else, but I didn't come here to argue. My goal is to try to understand and clearly explain my own position. But to truly understand and effectively explain, we first need to agree on the precise meaning of the words that we are using. For instance, I've often heard Alexander state that Trump is a person who is, well, let's just say immoral. He might express this using different terminology, perhaps immorality, but the core message of his statement remains exactly the same. However, I, for one, genuinely have not the slightest clue as to what Alexander considers to be immoral. For example, from my point of view, any person who takes what is yours from you, well, that is, takes it without your explicit permission, acts immorally. They might take your property, they might take your patents, your ideas, they might take your precious time, your very life. In such cases, you simply cannot agree to give that away. So, today, I would very much like for us to try not merely to toss around concepts that I am absolutely certain we all understand quite differently, but rather to base our discussions on concrete figures and facts, that is, on something that can actually be measured. And if we need to introduce a particular concept, then we should explain it, and not simply use words carelessly.
Let's hear it. Yes, Alexander, do you have any objections?
I have no objections to this because I don't quite understand what the actual essence of the question
Very well
is. We'll be dealing with the matter of definitions, what each person understands by what. Let's start with that. So my understanding of the situation, which is connected not so much with the concepts of morality, but rather with the notion of political history that we are all currently experiencing, is without a doubt linked to certain ideas that have formed throughout these millennia, for example, the concept of democracy. I would like to start at least by defining what democracy is and what alternative forms of political systems are, which directly relates to what is happening now. So then the word democracy itself originates from the term demos in ancient Greece, which, contrary to what is commonly believed, did not signify the power of the people, but rather the authority, the governance of an enlightened populace, or some kind of structured system. In contrast to the concept of demos, in my understanding, I perceive another term from ancient Greece, which is known as ochlos. This means that from this very word, the notion of ochlocracy originates. Perhaps some people have already heard of it, and for those who haven't, they can easily search for it on the internet. Ochlos is the mob. And accordingly, democracy, which is the power of the people, or demos, differs significantly from ochlocracy, which is the power of ochlos, or the mob. In that, in the former case, there exists a specific system of rules with which all participants in the process are in agreement. These rules include laws, they include limitations on governmental power, they include the fundamental rights of minorities, they include the rights to free and open public discussion, and they also include certain specific structures that are designed to effectively prevent any potential abuses of authority. Ochlocracy, that is the rule of the mob or the rule of the people, is in general power that is chaos. It is the rule of the chaotic, what you might call a genuine popular expression of will that is not tied in any way, shape, or form to any existing structures or institutions, in which there are no formal rules or regulations governing its operation, and where every single thing is ultimately determined and resolved. So to speak, it's often the one who is the most vocal, that's the one who gets their way. It manages to win, so to speak, the affection of the masses. And in the case of ochlocracy, ultimately, throughout history, power typically ends up in the hands of demagogues and populists, who, in essence, deceive the not-so-sophisticated masses. And as a result, we witness precisely what we have seen multiple times over the course of history. A classic example of ochlocracy, you see, would be fascism, Bolshevism, yes, Bolshevism, and other such movements. Or let's say some kind of radical Islamism, where a certain ideology is made paramount, and by means of this ideology, demagogues and populists seize control and begin to rule solely in their own interests, to the great detriment of the majority. You see, although the vast majority of people do support them. And I believe that America is currently standing at a very significant crossroads, where there are powerful forces that are leading towards the complete onset of mob rule. They are beginning to gather strength, if you will, pardon the repetition of words. And as a result, it may turn out that we find ourselves in a situation where classical democracy, based on rules, a system of moderation, reason, and so to speak, a reasonable, educated, the very fabric of society will inevitably yield to this absolute chaos and the unchecked power of the mob. While this has not yet come to pass, however, it must be said the current American administration's actions, specifically those of Trump and his political movement, are undeniably leading us down that path. And this by no means implies that things will necessarily unfold in that manner. Over the past few decades, for example, similar tendencies have indeed been observed in various democratic nations, but they somehow managed to effectively contain this very same trend. For instance, if we consider a rather regrettable event in European history, such as Brexit, that is the United Kingdom's withdrawal from the European Union, which most Britons have now come to regret, because this very Brexit has brought absolutely nothing good to Britain. This is a prime example of how, under the influence of demagogues and populists, it was possible, so to speak, to completely brainwash the majority. The majority then proceeded to vote for this very Brexit. Later, they began to tear their hair out in despair, but it's no longer possible to reverse this decision. Well, the very same thing is currently unfolding here in America. And there are clear symptoms of how, under the influence of populist and demagogic sentiments, Well, I suppose we are witnessing the implementation of political policy directions and decisions that are absolutely and unequivocally detrimental. And for me, as a biologist by training and education, the most prominent and striking example of this has been the current situation unfolding within the healthcare system. It was the prohibition of evidence-based medicine, the abolition or severe limitation of the vaccination system, which without a doubt, beyond any question, and again, I'm not speaking here as a professional, will inevitably lead to a significant deterioration of public health, to an increase in the number of fatalities and everything else that comes with it, to something that humanity successfully eliminated a full century ago with the introduction of widespread immunization. This is just one example. A lot of this is happening right now. And all of this is occurring because, given the new technologies available in mass media, a certain number of, let's say, unsophisticated people are being successfully fed, to put it simply, all sorts of conspiracy theories. And as a direct result, what ultimately rises to the very top is nothing but pure demagoguery. Again, as a prime example, one could easily point to our current Minister of Health, Robert Kennedy, or even Trump himself. And as a result, we end up making such ochlocratic decisions, which could potentially lead to a situation where, in the upcoming elections, once again, a substantial number of individuals will lend their support to these, shall we say, destructive political directions. And then, without even getting into all the other things that could be said, well, I'll probably have to conclude by saying that my allotted time is already running out. I will conclude by saying that there is also a very clear tendency for the moment when truly decisive changes are actually taking place, that it is also quite possible, so to speak, to witness direct violent actions. The actions on the part of the usurper of power, such as we witnessed during the attempted government coup on January 6th, the year 2021, when, apart the Republican Party, with the support of this very ochlocratic element, otherwise known as the MAGA movement, attempted to forcibly seize the Capitol and impose their will on political leaders. Well, the very idea, of annulling the election results and replacing them with a forceful seizure of power, including violent actions against the duly elected representatives. The very same thing is happening right now. It is absolutely clear to me that preparations are underway for a forceful seizure of power. In case they lose the elections this year and the next presidential elections. And a clear example of this kind of forceful takeover is the recent raid conducted by the FBI on the election commission located in Georgia, in Fulton County, where all of the election documents and the archives from the year 2020 were seized, and it was officially declared at the very highest level that we are undertaking this action in order to once again thoroughly review the election results in Fulton County, so that one might say it must be established that these elections were manipulated.
Yeah.
This is what you might call a first attempt, or perhaps a trial of our capabilities for what we should expect at the end of this year, in the midterm elections and in the elections of 2028, when the majority of Americans, and this is precisely what the latest public opinion polls indicate, decides to cast this political force onto the ash heap of history and votes against them. I think I will conclude my remarks here.
Thank you. Thank you, Alexander. Yes, your position is completely understandable.
On the 5th of June, 2025, you stated that for Putin, anything that weakens America is to his advantage, and that's why Trump is beneficial to him. So, I watched all the interviews, and I didn't find a single fact within them that would substantiate the assertion that Trump is weakening America. What I did find were numerous, repeatedly stated claims, but not once was there any specific data, not a single figure, nor any concrete concrete evidence presented to show that Trump had done anything that was beneficial for Russia, yet detrimental to the United States. Because if he does something that benefits the United States, and it coincidentally also benefits Russia, then what concern is that of ours? Now, moving on to the next point. So you mentioned that within the Republican Party, there are still individuals who are dissatisfied with his, shall we say, romantic ties to Putin. I understand you weren't implying a sexual relationship. And that is exactly why Donald Trump is unable to publicly and openly give his applause to Putin, saying something like, "What a fantastic job he is doing bombing the people of Ukraine." Let me repeat, what a great guy bombing Ukraine. These are your very own words, Alexander's words to be precise. The underlying meaning is Trump actually seems to like that Putin is bombing Ukraine. Trump, of course, cannot openly state this himself, but his actions clearly demonstrate it. Perhaps in some way this has become clear to you, hasn't it? Now, this is an interesting point, by the way. This man, Trump, he actually stopped several wars. Armenia and Azerbaijan, Thailand and Cambodia, Congo and Rwanda. So, if you look at his actions, you could say that he's a peacemaker. Stopping the war is a moral action, from my point of view. To cease the killing of people is a truly positive act. I believe the answers to both questions are quite clear. So yes, he is stopping the war. This is a moral action, a truly positive one. Furthermore, Trump orchestrated the Abraham Accords, which significantly helped to strengthen trade and diplomatic ties in the Middle East, and thereby reduce the risk of war and the potential destruction of Israel. Because this destruction, in principle, is always, so to speak, lurking somewhere. Trump stops, not starts wars. Where did Alexander get the idea that Trump supports and applauds Putin? He never said anything like that, in my opinion, or anyone who bombs any place, including Ukraine. It's completely beyond me. Third, this is another statement from you. Trump does nothing that would truly be a major issue for Putin. Well, we need to approach this in a bit more detail, because Alexander's assertion is that Trump does nothing that would harm Putin or Russia, for example. I personally had a completely different take on it, but let's try to analyze this. I will now talk about foreign affairs, and then during our Q&A session, and especially our short 15-minute free conversation, we will also touch upon the internal situation. So let's start with Venezuela. After Maduro's overthrow, the US declared de facto control over Venezuela's oil industry and explicitly stated its goal to push Russia, China, and Iran out of the country. Russian projects, credits, and political influence are being devalued. Experts say that Moscow is losing billions of dollars invested and its strategic foothold in the Western Hemisphere. The conclusion is the US taking control of Venezuela is not advantageous for Russia. Here, I'm not talking about anything else at all, morally or immorally, whether it had rights or not, profitable or unprofitable. I'm only arguing profitable or unprofitable. Perhaps Alexander believes that what we have captured, de facto captured Venezuela, is beneficial for Russia because he says that Trump never does anything that is bad for Russia. This means somehow it's either neutral or good for Russia. So, it's either the capture of Iran or its neutralization. The operation against Iran is directly described as an attempt to cut off Russia's influence in the region. Losing a partner in the Middle East weakens Moscow's position in circumventing sanctions, in bypassing them. Conclusion: neutralizing Iran is very detrimental to Russia. That is the exact opposite of what Alexander claimed in a dozen interviews. Now, let's turn our attention to NATO. Trump arrived at NATO during his first presidential term, and he stated, if you continue to sabotage our decisions and refuse to pay at least 2% of your budget to the army for the defense of your own nations, then I will cease to protect you. You can all go to hell. You are not fulfilling your, shall we say, commitments, and I will not fulfill my own obligations. What happened? NATO countries have rapidly increased their defense budgets. By 2024, 2025, 22 nations had already reached the 2% 5% GDP target. Now, Trump has come a second time. Trump, as the 47th, understood that Europeans spend money on social welfare instead of preparing for war. Yet, they hope that Americans will spend enough money to protect not only America, but them as well. Trump has concluded that the current situation in Europe is quite similar to what happened in Ukraine, where Ukraine, despite not preparing for a war with Russia, acted provocatively and also mismanaged its defense budget. Therefore, Trump has told Europe that they should allocate 5% of their budget to defense. So, Trump has done more for NATO than anyone else in the world today. He is the man who has revitalized NATO, quite the opposite of what Alexander claims. He is restructuring it, transforming it from an amorphous organization incapable of defending itself into a combat-ready, highly capable, powerful force. This has been confirmed multiple times by the Secretary General of NATO himself. The conclusion is clear. NATO's efforts, its strengthening and its rearmament are unequivocally not beneficial for Russia. I actually have a question for Alexander. It's not essential for him to start answering it immediately right now. It's just a thought, a question. If you believe that Trump did nothing detrimental to the Kremlin regime, then what I have just shared with you is beneficial for the Kremlin regime, advantageous for Russia, for the Kremlin itself, and personally for Vladimir Ilyich. Because if you were unaware of what I've just explained, then I am truly pleased that we found ourselves in this conversation together. I was able to share this with you. So, do you still believe that Trump did absolutely nothing to annoy or offend Putin? Or has your opinion, let's say, changed a little bit? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leon. Well, I guess we're now moving to the next stage, yes, with the opening statement. The positions of the parties, by and large, of today's participants are clear. So, let's move on to the questions now. And it was Leon who just asked the first question to Alexander. Alexander, please, you answer first, and then you can ask your question to Leon.
All right, then. So let's begin by stating that Trump, in my opinion, is truly caught between two fires. On the one hand, he has a completely obvious sympathy and favor towards Putin and his regime, just as he does for many autocratic and repressive regimes across the entire globe, and a strong aversion to democratic and liberal Europe. This particular sentiment has been expressed and reiterated countless times in a diverse range of official policy documents, significant public speeches, and formal declarations, beginning with the highly acclaimed and widely discussed address delivered by J.D. Vance at the prestigious Munich Security Conference, and extending all the way to the very latest and final address made by President Trump at the World Economic Forum in Davos. He very clearly does not sympathize with the fundamental principles upon which the democratic liberal democracy of Western Europe is generally based. And he has never criticized repressive regimes, such as Putin's regime, for example. Right, that's the first thing. And on the one hand, he harbors an obvious sympathy for these people and these regimes, because they are in general akin to his own vision of how politics should be structured, Stalin. On the other hand, he, as one might say, received a legacy from the generations that came before. A situation where, when viewed objectively from the perspective of one's own interest, and so to speak, the long-term consequences, the interests of America and the entire free world are at odds with the interests of authoritarian, anti-democratic regimes. He has to end public opinion, history, and the political establishment, including his own party's establishment. If you set aside this populist MAGA movement, they are, generally speaking, on a clearly pro-democratic path. Let's say if we consider the tradition that was left to us by figures such as Ronald Reagan or John McCain, then they and those who currently identify as their followers find themselves in stark contradiction with Trump on matters of foreign policy. So being in this very particular Trump, as it were, finds himself having to navigate a tunnel between two essentially incompatible tendencies. I want to state that I have absolutely no objection whatsoever to America using its power and influence across the globe to advance its own national interests, but only to the extent that America truly remains a democratic country, and where the mechanisms of liberal democracy are functioning. This is precisely what I was discussing at the very outset. That is to say, for as long as America continues to formulate its foreign policy based on the fundamental tenets of its own internal political system and endeavors to spread these principles across the globe, in terms of democracy, I see nothing wrong with America, so to speak, using its resources and capabilities to promote this policy or this trend across the globe. Well, the most striking example is America's crucial role in the fight against German Nazism during the Second World War, when it was absolutely and perfectly obvious that without America's involvement, nothing good or positive would have been achieved there. And it would have been absurd to demand, say, in 1942 or 1943, that France or United Kingdom or other countries of Europe contribute as much to the fight against Adolf Hitler as the United States did. On the contrary, both then and after the war, American taxpayers financed the struggle of liberal democratic countries against communist tyranny. The very same thing is happening now. Europe, of course, absolutely must concern itself with its very own security, but let's consider, and Ukraine even more so. But let's face it, without America, none of this will happen, for the simple reason that Europe doesn't know how to make those weapons, and Europe doesn't have such an army as the US has. Therefore, America certainly bears historical and, one might say, ideological duty to intervene in human affairs, sometimes from a position of strength, but again, only to the extent that America itself is a democratic country. The moment America transforms itself into one of these regimes, and right now I believe it's heading precisely in that direction, and will be hardly distinguishable from Putin's regime or the regime of Saudi Arabia. Then, in this, it all loses all meaning. Therefore, I believe that, yes, America must participate, it must pay. This is its, so to speak, historical purpose. And generations of Americans, including both the right and the left, understood this perfectly well. And no one, I'll remind you well, only the most extremely radical right-wing circles ever objected to Lend-Lease in its time or to the Marshall Plan, because the entire point of Lend-Lease was to stand against Hitler. The whole idea behind the Marshall Plan was to stand against Stalin. And so, further on in history. Now, you mentioned Israel and the Abraham Accords. On that point, I have no disagreement. I believe that it was a very sound and reasonable US policy to stimulate or to leverage animosity. All these Arab Sunni theocracies to the Iranian regime in order to strengthen its position. But I must also say that the primary opponents of Trump's stance and policies regarding the Arab-Palestinian-Israeli conflict are, in fact, the Israeli right wing, including Netanyahu himself and the right-wing faction of his government. It is precisely they who are now, with tremendous force, arguing against the actions of the American administration by imposing to the Israeli right-wing government. And so the political path that would lead to the establishment of a Palestinian state under the auspices of...
We have been sitting here for 10 minutes, and you said it would be 2 or 3 minutes.
Yes,
right?
yes, absolutely. That's right. Let's go ahead and do that then.
Yes,
let's go ahead.
let's-
and yes,
let's
you
do
have
it.
it right there with you, Alexander.
Let's do it that way.
And me, please interrupt me too, if I get carried away.
Okay, we've come to an agreement. Alexander, you have...
I have the right, by all accounts, to answer this correctly. Is that right?
No, Alexander's asking you a question.
But I thought that, as I recall, it said there.
Right,
Leon
then, if
give
it's
us a
brief,
brief
let's
response.
have a short comment.
You know, I'm probably the kind of person who is quite straightforward. If someone writes something to me, I tend to take it rather seriously. So, if it's meant to be serious, then here's my remark, my answer. For the question, I had 1 minute, if I recall correctly, for the answer, 2 to 3 minutes. But it turned out to be 10. And then I have the right, somehow, for 1 minute to respond to this, to give a follow-up answer. Is that correct?
Go on, yes, elaborate.
Let's just break all of this to hell. What's the point in all of this? Okay, my answer. They didn't answer my question. 10 minutes of explaining something I didn't even ask for. I asked which side the sun rises from the earth, and they told me that water boils at 90 degrees or 100. Well, I don't understand a single thing about what we're even talking about. So, I disagree with every statement that has been made, but that's fine. It's entirely your right to say that. Everything that you are saying is completely unsubstantiated. You have never once said anything that could be confirmed by actual facts. You are confirming this with your own personal inferences. Things will be very bad in the future. Very bad. But why will it be so bad in the future? Are you some kind of Cassandra? Or are you Nebuchadnezzar or someone else of that caliber who can do that? I mean, like Nostradamus, obviously, right? Who exactly are we to even try and say what is going to happen in the future? If you were to explain to me that today's situation is like this, yesterday's was like that, and the difference between A and B is exactly this, then I would understand. But as it is, listening for 10 minutes about how terrible the situation will be if something you don't like continues to go on. I don't like bureaucracy, and I don't like democracy. What's happening in Europe is simply a nightmare. It's called democracy. Vance is a good man. He explained everything to them so well. Folks, you shouldn't jail people who are supposed to have freedom of speech. You jail them for what they say that you don't like. And now, Alexander takes this and defends it, quite indiscriminately, without even bothering to explain what he disliked in what Vance said. Vance simply said a terrible thing. Then Trump in Davos gave a terrible speech. Well, then I can say Alexander just delivered a terrible speech. There, I've answered.
Thank you, Alexander. Please ask your question.
My question is about, for example, where are the weapons which Ukraine is meant to use to defend itself against Russian aggression? Where are the Tomahawk missiles? Where are those billions of dollars that America promised but is not delivering? And what would be the ultimate purpose or benefit for the United States of America if Ukraine were to suffer a defeat in this ongoing conflict?
You can take more time if you don't have enough.
That is quite enough for me. Thank you very much indeed. So, Alexander, the question is, where are the weapons? They're there because Ukraine hasn't produced any since 1990, and instead it stole everything that could be stolen. From being the second strongest power in the former Soviet Union, it transformed into, well, let's say Moldova, right? So, two republics of the former Soviet Union experienced negative industrial growth. These were Moldova and Ukraine. All the others had positive growth. Russia, if I'm not mistaken, had 30 to 40%, and Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and so on. Ukraine is one of two republics that plundered everything to such an extent they didn't prepare for anything at all. And when 4 months before the invasion, Georgia had already happened and Crimea was already gone, already 4 months before the 2022 invasion, Americans who were inclined to began to speak about it. Biden was in favor of it. Well, from my perspective, at the very least, that's what he stated. Perhaps he misspoke, but at least he did say that if you fellows quickly seize control of Russia, then we will not intervene, correct? So he actually said this. These are his words. I'm not making this up right now. It's a fact. I don't have it in my hands right now, but you can check it for yourselves anywhere. It's real. Biden said that himself. And this was a month before the invasion. So here's the thing. Ukraine, even 4 months before Russia actually invaded, not only did they not begin to do anything, for instance, to ask the Americans to bring 20,000 soldiers and station them on the border for a joint military exercise. No, they even cleared all the minefields that stretched from Belarus all the way to Kyiv. Why? And I don't know why. Who the hell knows? So the first thing they made was a weapon, but they didn't make any there. That's the first answer. Second question, what do we owe anyone? To whom? What do we owe anyone? For 51 years of my life, I've lived in what's called the territory outside the Soviet Union's borders. I was just thinking about that as you were speaking. Am I obligated to anyone? Why do I owe anything to Ukraine? By the way, in Congo, 6 million people were killed in 30 days of war. Why am I not obligated there? There's a tremendous number of different places where people are killed simply because, yes, one of my grandfathers was born in the territory of Kharkiv and then he came to St. Petersburg. But just because my grandfather was born there, am I emotionally obligated to Ukraine? Why shouldn't a farmer in Iowa be able to buy, I don't know, a phone for his son or a bicycle for his daughter? Or should he be forced to send that money to Ukraine to buy weapons for them? Why? That's just utter nonsense. No one ever promised them anything. They're constantly waving the Budapest Memorandum around. All of Ukraine hasn't even read it. We didn't deceive them. Kuchma deceived them. Everything written in this stinking document, pardon my not yet French, but French will come. So, what it states there is the following. If someone were to attack you, then we are obligated to go to the UN Security Council and to talk about this matter. That's all. There is nothing else written there at all. I have read it from left to right, from right to left, in Hebrew, in English, in every way you can imagine. And there is simply nothing else written there at all. No one ever promised them anything. What exactly did we promise them? To supply them with weapons or to send our people there to fight? Why is this conflict, which is happening right here in Europe, between these so-called brotherly nations who can't seem to divide something? Just look at the names of these oligarchs in Russia and the names of these oligarchs in Ukraine. Half of Russian oligarchs have Ukrainian surnames and a good portion of them are Jewish too. Naturally, wouldn't you agree? Just as in Ukraine, you'll find many Russian surnames. Yes, Poroshenko, while president, traded with Russia, even though they were in a state of war. Today they tell me things, but I know how to look at the numbers myself. From the time of Crimea's annexation until the start of the war, trade turnover between Russia and Ukraine increased. It didn't end, but rather it increased by 30%. Let me repeat, from the moment of Crimea's annexation until the moment the active phase of the war began, trade between Russia and Ukraine increased by 30%. He tells me something very simple. Am I really supposed to pay for this now, for the fact that they are such crooked bastards? Sviatoslav Goncharov. Yes, they steal absolutely everything they can get their hands on. They deceive their very own people. They force 6 million to flee. They killed them. They killed 1 million people. Just when they were already about to sign the papers. Arakamia, I've spoken about this twice already. He flew to Istanbul and they reached an agreement on everything. This took place exactly 23 days after the beginning of the active phase of the war in the year 2022. Arakami flew to to Istanbul and reached an agreement with the Russians on absolutely everything. Russia then got a bloody nose, completely caught off guard, because Trump had supplied weapons, javelins, and other such things. Trump supplied weapons, Obama supplied blankets, but Biden was stealing. And Biden, his primary stance regarding Ukraine was as follows: if you do not immediately appoint a prosecutor general for Ukraine who will conduct an investigation into my son, who is quite naturally engaged in theft within Ukrainian territory, then I will withhold the $1 billion that America had pledged to you. If you make my son well, then America, not me, Biden, will give you $1 billion. But if you don't make him well, I won't give you that $1 billion. Therefore, no, we promised nothing. We spent enormous amounts of money to throw out, democracy from Ukraine. We spent around $5 billion. 2 Newland hearings in Congress and the Senate, and you'll all find out. We spent $5 billion, and these are only the funds we've admitted to, so that Ukrainians would go out to Maidan to overthrow the president who wanted to work with both sides. We were busy shaking up America. What kind of weapons did we promise them? We didn't actually start this war. Yes, Putin's a scumbag, a bloody maniac and such. Not because he started the war, but because of the brutal methods he uses to wage it. But that's not our business. Once again, why should someone in Arizona have to give their money so that someone else can benefit in the territory of Congo? How much money did Ukrainians donate to Guatemala where people were being killed? 0. Why should Americans donate their money to Ukraine? That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lion. Alexander has the right to make a statement. Let's then really strictly adhere to the time limit. 3 minutes for your reply. Please, Alexander.
I will try to be brief. I have practically no comments on this speech that we have just heard. It speaks for itself. I'll just remind you that it's truly amazing. This very concept, this idea of why should we, it really reminds me of the speeches given by right-wing politicians from the years 1940, 1941, and 1942, when they were objecting to the United States entering World War II and to providing assistance to Great Britain and the Soviet Union in their war against Hitler. The war was lost. Therefore, who spent how much money on aid to Ukraine and on weapons, you can easily look it up. Just go to Google and see for yourself. The difference between the Trump administration and, let's say, the Biden administration is tenfold, a huge difference. All the weapons Ukraine is fighting with come from the Trump administration. So what about corruption? There's a lot of it. We are experiencing it everywhere now. We are going through a truly massive corruption scandal related to the Epstein files, in which absolutely everyone is implicated. But then again, if we compare the corruption of those times, no one has ever made any accusations of corruption against Zelensky. As for Poroshenko, yes, there was definitely corruption. It doesn't even come close to comparing in terms of its sheer magnitude and scale to the corruption of Donald Trump, who by all accounts personally enriched himself by well over $1 billion by deliberately leveraging and exploiting his powerful position as the president of the United States, starting from the very beginning by consistently securing highly advantageous and profitable contracts with the government. And ultimately, it all comes down to the fact that he is enriching his personal friends and associates by cleverly manipulating the entire stock market. Therefore, I don't really have anything further to say here. So perhaps I should pose a question instead. I have a question ready. Is it my turn to go now?
Yes, we each have 3 questions. Yes. So we're taking them one by one. Participants, you've already asked.
Well, then let me immediately, so to speak, on the heels of this, ask a question regarding the corruption of the Trump administration and his family, their personal enrichment by leveraging the administrative and economic resources at their disposal.
Thank you.
Excuse me, what is the question?
The question is, do you see elements of corruption in what's happening, for example, with this family Bitcoin company? And is it right from your point of view? Does it not fall within your understanding of corruption?
I honestly don't quite understand the question, because perhaps there's something I'm not aware of. Well, for instance, let's say you made a certain assertion that the scale of Trump's corruption is significantly higher than Poroshenko's. So does that mean you know the exact amount of money stolen by Trump and the exact amount of money stolen by Poroshenko? How can this be? Where did you get that information? I am simply the only person in the entire world who knows this. Secondly, Trump became richer by $1 billion during his first term. Well, as a direct result of his first term, he became richer by $1 billion. I have to tell you right now that the numbers just look, they don't support you. Trump's financial standing at the moment he concluded his first presidency was estimated to be $2 billion less than when he first came to power. And a lot was written about this. The left-wing press, the press rather sarcastically, and the right-wing. Just look, all presidents, for example, Obama leaves office, 2 months pass, and suddenly he has $100 million in his bank account. From zero, $100 million. And for what? Well, there's a whole range of organizations that suddenly, for some unknown reason, paid him. $100 million came from 3 sides. Now, Gorov, after he left power in just 2 years, he accumulated a fortune of $200 million. This means he was being paid off for some kind of dealings. Trump, when he left office, was $1 billion poorer. So, you know, what you said reminds me, like Ivanov won in football, didn't win. But lost, not in football, but in preference. And not Ivanov, but Rabinovich. Right? So everything is exactly the opposite. He didn't gain 1 billion but lost 2 billion. There. Now these are figures you can easily verify. If you give me 30 seconds, I'll immediately pull them out and show them to you. Now, then, there was another absolutely fantastic claim, completely unsupported by anything, just your accusation. For such things, people actually get tried, enriching Trump's friends through market manipulation. Wow. Unbelievable. And I can say there, you killed your nephew. What nephew do you mean? I didn't have a nephew. I only had a niece. Her name is Erythea. Just get out. Well, it's the very same principle. Absolutely. To cover someone in mud, and then whatever you manage to wash off, that's what you wash off. It was quite astonishing to hear this in our discussion. Now, Biden, you mentioned, was giving in tens. I wrote down exactly what you said. Biden gave in the tens. Not 10, but in the tens. Well, at least 20 times. In the tens means at least 20 or even more. Biden gave 20 times more weapons than Trump. Excuse me, where did you get this information? Or are you just making it up as you go, which is most likely, or you're using some completely fantastic sources? What on earth are you saying? What are you even talking about? 20 times more. My God, right? Now, to the core of your question. So I'm not told I've already answered it. You haven't presented a single piece of evidence yet proving there was corruption. You simply asked me, how do you feel about Trump's alleged corruption? I feel very good about it. Do you know why? Because I don't see it? If you actually see it, then bring it out and state it clearly, instead of just throwing mud, hoping that some of it might stick.
Thank you very much, Leon. Alexander, you have a very brief comment you can make, and then Leon's question will follow right after that.
Sandro, well, regarding the weapons the Biden administration allocated to Ukraine, I don't recall the exact figures right now, but it was something in the ballpark of around $80 billion in military and economic aid throughout his entire tenure, whereas javelins were mentioned here, and their total value was only about $12 million. So that's orders of magnitude less. At this very moment in time, all of the assistance that Ukraine is currently receiving is being fully funded by the nations of Europe. Well, that's the first thing. Secondly, if you're talking about specific examples of corruption, the figures relate to Trump's new term. For this year, just go ahead. Anyone can go into Google and type in what is the growth. What about the financial state of the Trump family over the last year and a half? You will see figures in the hundreds of millions of dollars, primarily associated with Bitcoin trading. And as a specific example of a corrupt incident, we can recall a private jet, which in my estimation was worth either $100 or $200 million, or perhaps even more. I don't recall the exact figures right now, but we're talking about hundreds of millions. A plane that Qatar gifted to Trump. Undoubtedly, this was not done without ulterior motives.
Did Qatar give it to Trump? He presented it to the United States of America, and it is now located in the United States of America within the air fleet. Regarding the fact that his wealth has increased, you seem to have forgotten that Trump, when he was between 45 and 47, he founded an organization called Truth Social, which did not exist prior to that time. He built it with his own two hands. Today, his personal stake in that company is estimated to be worth $5 billion. So, naturally, he became richer because he created an organization. This is how values are created in our free market and capitalism. You come up with something, people like it, they buy it, they pay you, you get richer. What's the connection? If you believe that capitalism is corruption, then you are absolutely right. But that's why I asked from the start. Let's try to communicate in a way that we understand each other. Now I get it. You consider the free market corruption, but I believe it's the only way to develop humanity. Well, okay, let me go ahead and ask my question then.
Please, what is your question, Leon?
Trump is actively lowering the price of oil. He's bringing liquefied natural gas into Europe. He forced Russia out of Venezuela, and now he's attempting to do the very same in Iran. He relocated the United States Embassy to Jerusalem and also officially recognized the Golan Heights. I served in the Israeli army, so these aren't just empty words to me. I fired shots on these Golan Heights. I know exactly why this is important to us. He deployed the fleet to protect Israel from Iran's missiles. Trump stopped several wars. Trump is trying to lower taxes on manufacturers. He stopped illegal immigration, lowered inflation, and reduced the flow of drugs into the US. His people have already found 120,000 of the 300,000 imported children, parentless, who were sold into slavery. Some became servants in factories, others were forced into brothels. We all know this. Trump has already found 120,000 of them. So, he's fighting crime and has successfully reduced crime rates in the cities where local authorities allow him to operate. So, my question to you is this. What exactly is it that you don't like about all of this? Why do you consider him a bad president for America?
First of all, much of what you listed, in my opinion, does not correspond to reality.
If possible, tell me exactly what it is, not too much.
Let's go through the points then right away. You just list your specific points and I will provide my answers.
Good.
So the second thing, the second point I wanted to make, all of this is indirectly related to what I started with, namely that Trump is leading things towards the usurpation of power, the establishment of a personal power regime.
So you are Cassandra, is that correct?
Yes, I am Cassandra in this sense.
Okay, and Nostradamus. The very first point that I brought up for discussion was this. Trump is importing liquefied natural gas into Europe. Is that actually true, or is it not?
Trump is bringing to Europe, no, it's not Trump who's bringing them, but American oil companies. But this...
It's unclear why this wasn't done during Biden's and Obama's terms. Yes, of course, Trump doesn't actually carry anything himself. He doesn't go out in the mornings warming up to personally deliver tanks of liquefied natural gas to Europe. You are right. But why, pardon me, engage in a dialogue at such a level? So we've established that I wasn't lying when I stated that Trump is importing liquefied natural gas into Europe. Did Trump kick Russia out of Venezuela? Is that a lie?
It remains to be seen how all of this will eventually end.
He has now expelled Russia from Venezuela. Is this a trick? No trick. Let's move on. Trump is trying to do the same thing in Iran. I'll tell you point by point. Is this a trick or not?
What he's trying to do, we'll see.
He's trying. Is this a deception
I don't
or
see what he's
is
doing.
it not? Is this a deception or is
It's a
it
question.
not? You have accused me of telling lies. I do not lie, especially not when I am accused of lying. You must take responsibility for what you say, Alexander.
This is open to many interpretations.
He is trying to accomplish the exact same thing in Iran. How is it possible for that to be open to interpretation?
Firstly, I personally don't see any indication that he has successfully removed Russia from Venezuela. For the time being, the exact same regime that was in place under Maduro is still governing Venezuela. Secondly, the entire question of what exactly will transpire with Iran is still completely up in the air, because as we can clearly observe from the current situation.
I said, Trump is trying. Trump is trying to accomplish the very same thing in Iran.
Leon, let's do this. Let's still give Alexander a chance to respond, but you will have a reply that you can add to.
It was Alexander who suggested that I ask question after question so that he could respond to each one. And I specifically ask, did I lie about this? And Alexander starts talking again. This won't be the case.
Unless I'm wrong, Alexander didn't accuse you of lying.
All right, exactly. Let's just rewind the tape. He claimed that everything, or rather, most of what I had said was completely
untrue. I said that much of what you said is inconsistent. So regarding the situation with Iran, I am not entirely convinced that Trump's current policy towards Iran will actually lead to a weakening.
You are again trying to be Nostradamus.
You are also.
No. I'm telling you, he's attempting to do precisely the same thing in Iran. I don't know how one could possibly be more specific than that. He is trying to do exactly the same thing in Iran. What makes you think that I have lied?
In parallel with this, he's strengthening Putin in Europe. In this sense,
Trump is trying to do the very same thing in Iran. So tell me, where did I lie?
I didn't say that you told a lie.
You said I lied. You said I wasn't telling the truth. You said it.
You are presenting your interpretation of the events as the actual reality.
Let me put it this way. I didn't lie. The bottom line is, Trump moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. Where did I lie?
This has absolutely nothing to do with Iran.
I said Trump moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. What part of that was a lie?
Trump moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem. What of it? Some kind of...
Did I lie or not? All we are finding out I lied is what I said. To which you said I told a lie. You said I lied. Most of what Leon said now, you didn't say Leon. What he said just now was untrue. I wrote down your words.
He translated, I agree with the way he translated it.
I agree. Embassy. Now listen, he recognized the Golan Heights. He recognized the Golan Heights. So tell me, where's the lie?
One more time. What you just said about...
He officially recognized the Golan Heights.
Okay, he recognized the Golan. Next, go on. Recognize the Golan.
Yes or no? Did I deceive you or was I honest?
Did Trump recognize Golan? He did.
All right. So I wasn't actually lying. Are you going to acknowledge that you were mistaken? I was not lying. Trump deployed the naval fleet to defend Israel against incoming Iranian missiles. Where was I lying?
Exactly. What do Putin's relations have to do with this? This I don't...
You told me that I lied. I don't like when people say that to me. You said, oh, please defend your position. Or say, I'm sorry that I accused you of lying. I misspoke.
You've taken everything I've just said and used it as proof that Trump is an enemy.
I dare say I lied.
Will you let me finish my sentence?
Let's give Alexander a chance to answer, Leon, and then you can respond.
You listed a huge number of things that are not directly related to the case. These are things that are not directly related to proving that Trump is an enemy of Putin. And
at that point, I even started to feel sorry for the old man who, as it turned out, is the same age as mine. He, I, and Vladimir Putin are about the same age, maybe a year or two apart. Fascinating, isn't it? Don't you think so? Now, did you hear me say anything about Putin? Or is Professor once again trying to divert the topic and muddle our discussion a little bit? Notice how carefully I avoid using the word He's a liar. I never said that, right?
And does not strengthen his position. I contend that Trump, through many of the things he does, is not merely fighting Putin, but is actually helping him on the international stage.
I have a question here that I've noted down, and I will just go ahead and repeat it. I did not come across the name Putin at all. I didn't find anything you just tried to respond to anywhere. You know, I'm actually starting to enjoy this conversation because it, to my great regret, confirms all my various observations about the so-called intellectual elite that came from a certain place. In summary, I said 100%, it's written right there on my screen. That is exactly what I said. I am simply repeating what I said. The word Putin was not there. This utter nonsense that was invented along the way, it simply wasn't there. I said, the question is, Trump is lowering the price of oil, which from my point of view is absolutely true. Trump is bringing liquefied natural gas to Europe. Trump expelled Russia's influence from Venezuela. Trump is now attempting to do the very same thing in Iran. Trump relocated the United States Embassy to Jerusalem. Trump officially recognized the Golan Heights. Trump then deployed the fleet to protect Israel from Iranian missiles.
What does all this have to do with anything?
I asked, what is the relevance of this to what? I was told I could ask a question, and I'm asking it. Why don't I have the right to ask a question? I don't want to ask about Putin. I want to ask about something else. Don't tell me it has nothing to do with Putin. Let them sleep with each other in any position they want. That's their business. I stated that Trump brought an end to several wars. Trump is attempting to reduce taxes for producers. He put a stop to illegal immigration, he brought down inflation, and he curbed the influx of drugs into the United States. His administration located 120 of the 300,000 children who had been trafficked and forced into slavery. Some were sent to work in factories, others were forced into brothels. I said, he fights crime and reduced crime in cities where local authorities let him in. So, what was the question? What don't you like about all of this, everything I just said? What is it that you don't like about this? And the second thing I asked was, why do you consider him a bad president for America? And I didn't ask anything else about Putin or anyone else, Kim Jong-il. I didn't say that, I swear. All I said is what I just read to you. Again, it's right here in front of me. So if you can, then go ahead. If you can, great. If you can't, just say, I can't. Let's move on. Why do you believe that Donald Trump is a bad president for the United States of America? That's all.
So my answer has two parts. First, all this discussion, the shouting, and so to speak, the raising of hands to the sky, stemmed from the topic of what's happening in Europe and from the argument that why should we get involved in the war in Ukraine? That's where it all began. Well, that's kind of the first thing I wanted to mention. The second point really is why I personally believe that Trump is a bad president. It's primarily because the economy you see is going downhill. Because you know, it just is what is most important, because he weakens America on the world stage. And because, most importantly, he is leading to the usurpation of power and the establishment of a personal rule regime. This is the core of the problem. As for the issue of immigration, that is a very specific matter. Immigration absolutely needs to be brought under proper control, but not through the specific methods that he is currently employing, namely by flagrantly violating every single conceivable and inconceivable law that protects human rights, freedom of speech, and other things.
You guys do not want to answer the question. This means that one question has nothing to do with the other. I asked separately, as they say in America.
Lyova, well, as the saying goes, we have what we have. Alexander replied, so.
I'm reacting. You said I could react, didn't you? Well, I'm reacting. I'm saying Alexander didn't answer my question at all. He started making things up again, claiming this question actually stems from some other completely different issue. And I've already even forgotten where it supposedly came from. These are entirely separate
we'll
matters.
Still be returning to this. I think it will become much more understandable.
But why exactly are we not going to revisit this? And why is that, I ask?
Well, because we are talking about this right now, right? That is Trump's role in the life of the United States. Is he an evil or not? So this is the topic of our today's discussion. Therefore, one way or another, it will all revolve around this. So maybe later we will try to understand.
From my point of view, you are also
Am I
exaggerating.
blowing this out of proportion?
Of course,
Why?
Alexander just said that the question arises from and made up what it arises from. This is a completely separate question that has a specific relation, whether Trump is an evil or not. That's exactly what I asked. Let me remind you, I asked, do you think Trump
Alexander
is a bad
answered in the
president
way
for
that he
America?
answered. Yes, he did. Whether or not you are pleased with his reply, that is an entirely different matter. But Alexander
Very
did answer,
good.
if I'm not mistaken.
My brief comment, which you incorporated into the rules of conduct, was this. I believe Alexander dodged the question by starting to talk about how, apparently, Jews wave their hands. He didn't say he was Jewish, but I wave my hands, yes. And when I need to say, I don't know, I hand a watermelon to a passerby and say, how should I know? And I wave my hands.
So you concluded, is that right, that Alexander didn't respond?
The host, he doesn't just limp. He's got no legs at all. It's Radio Vera's right to put anyone they want in the moderator's chair, but this one turned out to be a clone of MSNBC, ABC, CNN. He behaves the same way the US moderators usually do, siding with their own, shielding them from, whenever it starts to look like the other side might, God forbid, win the argument. Tell me, please, can't Alexander handle this himself? Must you absolutely defend him?
Me? No, I'm not standing up for anyone's defense.
Is it no or is it yes? Is the question yes or no?
Who are you asking, me or Alexander, at this moment?
You said no right off the bat. I said something and you replied no. So I'm asking, no. What are you saying no to?
Who are you asking that question, Liova?
You just said it. I said something and you responded with no. What exactly do you mean by no?
I'm really starting to lose my understanding now. What was it that I said no to?
And I don't know either. You just said no, that's all.
Well, then maybe we should continue?
So then, are you the moderator or am I?
No, I mean, are we going to continue with this or are we... I'm not quite sure what it is you're asking me. What do you mean no?
How astonishing. You remember clearly you said no. Oh well, I guess that's fine.
No, I'm telling you, I said no.
We are having a discussion. Instead of talking about the facts, it's turned into the following. And I believe we are having a discussion.
Leon, this is
Instead
truly
of
a
talking about
discussion,
the facts,
but,
it's turned
but
into
the
the
one
following.
to pass judgment on this discussion should be either the viewer or someone else. What Alexander says, does that suit you or not? Or conversely, it's, as they say, your right, yes, to decide for yourself how you perceive it. Well, that's essentially all. That's my point.
Excellent. Then I would very much like to ask Alexander in his next comment to explain what exactly the economy is going down means. Why is that? How could he possibly know that? He went to the future and found out that Trump would be usurping or plans to seize control of the government. And therefore, immigration needs to be stopped in some other way. A way that no one has been able to figure out for the past 50 years. But Alexander knows exactly how to stop illegal immigration if Trump is doing it wrong.
I have three questions. So before I answer them, I want to share, or rather recall, an old saying that comes from the mists of time. And it goes like this: Jupiter, you are angry, therefore you are wrong. So then...
in my opinion, a very stupid expression.
Well, that is precisely the way that it is translated.
Plenty of foolish things our ancestors said, just as many as we do, even more. They had more time.
All right, so I'm just stating the facts and recalling this phrase. So regarding the economy going down, the economy is going down because, according to American polls, the majority believe their financial situation has worsened and that the cost of living is rising. what, so to speak, the prices for everyday consumer goods are steadily increasing, and they perceive absolutely no sense of contentment or approval regarding the economic policies pursued by the Trump administration. What was the second point you mentioned? I'll address that. You actually brought up three distinct topics. First, it was economies going into inflation.
From where? From where? By what means did you manage to travel into the future and discover that Trump is trying to establish a dictatorship?
It's quite simple. Because we already had an attempted overthrow of the government on January 6, 2021, when crowds of this very rabble, the mob, so to speak, tried to storm the Capitol and impose upon the country an illegitimate election result, which in their opinion had been stolen. All these people were apprehended, they faced trial, were convicted, and then Trump pardoned them. By doing so, he sent a clear signal to future would-be attackers that similar actions, attempts at a violent coup in the country, would remain unpunished. This is the very first one. The second point is that, in contrast to the events that transpired on January 6th of 2021, my apologies, the next time that Trump and his people won't like the election results, opposed unlike that time, they will have control over law enforcement agencies, namely the FBI, the Department of Justice, and others. With the security agencies and the police in Washington, it won't be so easy to prevent this attempted coup d'etat. The third piece of evidence is that a forceful takeover occurred just the other day, as I mentioned earlier, of the election office in the state of Georgia, Fulton County, where, if you remember, that's the very county, that very same county, the one where Trump made those calls to the Secretary of State of Georgia, and he pressured him to find, quote unquote, for him 12,000 votes in order to overturn the results of the vote count in Georgia. The very topic itself concerning the fact that elections, the claim that the 2020 elections were stolen has been debunked countless times, including not only dozens of courts where this assertion was rejected, but also statements from Trump's very own team, starting with Vice President Pence, and for instance, Attorney General William Barr, who consistently maintained that all these allegations were nothing but pure fiction, all the way down to the local officials who were directly responsible for overseeing the elections. And finally, one more point, so to speak, a symptom indicating that we are heading towards the establishment of a personal power regime is connected with Trump's latest statements from just yesterday or the day before, where he said that he once, and as we know, when he sets his mind on something, he will try to achieve it unless he is met with strong resistance. That he intends, as he himself stated, to nationalize the elections in precisely those states where he suffered a defeat last time, specifically in those 15 states where he was defeated in the previous election. He didn't explicitly name them, however, but everyone is well aware of which states these are. And the nationalization of elections, what it means is that you would be taking away the control over the conduct of elections, which is constitutionally assigned to local authorities, and then transfer all of that authority to the federal government's jurisdiction. He even said not of the federal administration, but rather the Republican Party. So yes, all of this, everything here leads me to believe that Trump is pursuing a deliberate political strategy aimed at a violent, unconstitutional takeover of power in the event that he or his movement loses the upcoming elections. So that's the second point. What was the third one? The first point was the economy. The second is why I think this is leading to a complete seizure of power. What's the third one then?
Honestly, I don't even remember anymore.
All right, then I propose we move on to the final question. Alexander, it's your turn, as they say, to ask Leon a question, then Leon's reply, and then Leon's return question to Alexander.
Well, my question to Leon, it actually has to do with, well, let's put it this way. Firstly, I would really like to hear Leon's reaction to all the above-mentioned symptoms of Trump and his team leading things towards a power usurpation. And to that, I'd also like to add a question regarding I'm sometimes mistaken for a Democratic Party supporter. That's not true. I supported Reagan and I supported John McCain. So I think regarding the position of those, if he said the question is members, so to speak, of the traditional direction of the the Republican Party, such as the Klan, let's say Cheney, or people like that who have left from there, like Paul Ryan, or one might say the very essence of the Reaganite tradition, the Reaganite line within the Republican Party.
There is more.
All of them have turned into what's called anything but Trump, into anti-Trumpers. And according to the most recent polls, a significant portion of Republicans still firmly believes that MAGA and this particular inclination towards an authoritarian political line is not truly beneficial for either the Republican Party or the nation as a whole.
Leon, is it understandable to you? Two questions arise.
There are two extremely important questions at hand. I'm going to give it my best shot.
Please take your time to think. We'll certainly give you more time then, of course. So don't let that be a concern for you. Go right ahead, please.
Well, never mind. I will try. So let's define these questions so that we can understand what it is exactly that I'm trying to answer. The first one has to do with the coup d'etat and all that, and so on and so forth. And the second one has to do with the split or disagreement in Republican Party, or so to speak, in the conservative movement, and where I stand, how I, so to speak, assess it, who I'm with there, and so on. Not just who I'm with, but why I am where I am. So to speak, let's move to the first half. What you call an attempted coup is incredibly strange to me because, you see, our country has an army that generally doesn't usually enter the state's interior. There are National Guardsmen in every state, and they can be federalized and placed under federal command. There is also the police, and generally, several ministries possess their own security forces. Now, as far as I know, not a single one of these departments, associations, services, and the like was present or took any part in the so-called storming of the Capitol. Why the storming of the Capitol? Because it was incredibly strange, this storming of the Capitol. These were absolutely unarmed people. Well, at the very least, we know for a fact that 100%, perhaps someone there might have accidentally had a pistol or two, but in principle, they were completely unarmed. They went into how they got in there is also quite an interesting question. I had several of my friends and acquaintances there. They ascended the steps, made their way into the Capitol building, remained inside for a significant period, and subsequently departed from the premises. There were certain individuals who were forcefully striking the doors. To this very day, we are unable to locate them because not a single person among those who were closely associated with neither MAGA nor the conservatives and so forth, as it's often said, can identify them and declare, there he is. So, these were some unknown individuals, people no one knew. They broke down these doors. Well, I can't accuse anyone specifically, but there's a very strong suspicion that the FBI was behind this. Maybe they did it themselves, maybe they hired people, maybe something else. But now it doesn't matter. So, the city, in summary, completely unarmed people entered the Capitol, walked around inside, and left within an hour. Most of them were very friendly with the police. The police opened doors, showed them where to go, and the internal security showed them where to go and how to proceed. 3 days prior to these events, Trump's representatives contacted the city on 3 separate occasions, a fact that has been 100% confirmed, and requested the deployment of, shall we say, municipal police forces. The city refused. They then contacted Nancy Pelosi twice, because Nancy Pelosi is the only one who possesses the authority to summon police or take any action within the Capitol grounds. She refused both times. Today she's already in hysterics about it. Her daughter was already hysterical about it. That mom just didn't understand or didn't know or something. So 3 times Trump's people requested that some kind of force be brought in because they were concerned there would be clashes, problems, and other such issues. This was not done. It's all documented. All of it exists. So these people then entered, were inside the Capitol, and essentially did nothing, then simply left and dispersed. So now those who were defending the Capitol, no, not defending, but simply opening doors, showing them around, they all had weapons, as we know, because, you see, Babbitt, the woman who was there, the only death that occurred as a result of this invasion, this assault, was, Major Babbitt, a reservist. She was a military member, but she was dressed in civilian clothes. A police officer then drew his pistol and shot her directly at point-blank range, killing her. Even though she herself did not undertake any actions that could possibly have influenced his financial well-being, his personal life, and other such matters. So, in summary, a coup d'etat with the help of a completely unarmed crowd of several thousand people, despite the fact that 20, 30, 40,000 servicemen with weapons were nearby and could have immediately come to help if needed. And none of these factions declared they were there for Trump staging a coup. So it was some strange coup that didn't affect anything, and in fact couldn't affect anything. Voting was simply taking place. Of course, it was important. That's why they gathered from all over America and went, so to speak, to protest. But the protest was, well, absolutely normal. Unfortunately, at this very moment, I don't fully grasp what truly transpired there. But regrettably, it led to some rather unpleasant consequences. That is, nothing resembling a coup d'etat, judging by all the absolutely objective data. The amount of weapons, the number of people involved, calls requesting, so to speak, security protection there and similar things. No coup d'etat was actually taking place there. Now, can a government coup happen? Usually those people who try to seize power, they have a slogan, centralization. That is, they might say it or they might not say it, but they always try to centralize things so that, let's say, from here, from one single center, they can command everyone. The idea that Trump could potentially change the Constitution and somehow alter the elections in the United States in some really strange way at a time when, how many are there? 61% of Congress, 61% of the Senate, and 75% of the states must vote for changes and amendments to the Constitution. It's strange because, well, neither Trump, nor conservatives, nor MAGA, nor anyone else has that many people in Congress, in the Senate, and there aren't that many votes in the states. I mean, we don't even have 75% of Republican governors for this to pass. So changing the Constitution is, so to speak, complete nonsense. Everything Trump says is, guys, how can you allow people to vote who don't even show you ID, right? When we board an airplane, we're told to show our identification. At the bank, we must present our identification. At social services, we're asked to show our identification. But to vote, one of the most important things in a democracy, if we are for democracy. I personally I am against democracy. But so to speak, most of the people with whom I converse, they don't really, so to speak, understand it, and that's why they support it. It seems to me that they all understand it perfectly well. And so to speak, they claim that the most important thing we have is voting, right? Once every 4 years, we cast our ballots, and then these individuals whom we've elected then act on our behalf. So then, why is it that one cannot display their official identification there? I mean, to essentially clear the path for themselves? So much deception, I don't know, but it paves the way. By the way, Hillary Clinton still claims that in 2016 there was fraud, and that's why she lost. And these frauds were done by either Putin or Schmutin. It doesn't matter. Now, there are at least a dozen Democrats who claim there were frauds during the elections in their states, in their districts, and so on. They disagree with what's happening, and so to speak, are foaming at the mouth, demanding. Basically, it's quite a normal situation when a person who thought they would be elected but were not thinks, how come? It can't be, because all the results were there. And so it means there was some kind of deception, fraud, and the like. By the way, a huge amount of fraud deception is being uncovered. So in general, anything is possible. Now, regarding the second part, concerning what Trump will be... How was that question formulated? What exactly was it that you asked? Could you be more specific?
He spoke about the split, about the turning point.
Oh, the split. Who I support and so on. The thing is, I proceed from one very, very simple idea. I have my own, developed over some years of studying political economy, idea of what, from my point of view, is good and what is bad. It's truly terrible when they take away the money that I've personally worked hard to earn. For example, let's say I went out and I managed to figure out a way to cure cancer. I'm making this medicine and I have as a waiting list. I charge $1,000 per dose. They pay me and I became a billionaire very quickly. Then some person comes and says, all right, give 60, 70, 80% of this to someone. To whom, I ask? Well, to those who don't have money. What? Why should I give this away? I never agreed to that. Oh, you're a bad billionaire. Wait a minute. You just came to me, took my medicine, and said, thank you very much, be happy. Yes, and now we want to take 80% of that money. Or, let's say, in town, 3 people make shoes. I make shoes better than anyone, the most beautiful and the cheapest. Everyone comes to me and buys, the others go out of business. People come to me and say, hey, give up half, like 60, 70%.
You are painting a picture of exactly the 90s in Russia.
Yes, but why? America as it is today. This is America as it is today. Congress gathers, 450 people gather and decide how much money to take from me. And when I resist, they tell me, just a second, we have democracy. Don't you dare interfere. I said, I'm not giving it up. Then you'll get a club right to the head. Then I'm standing at my house with the weapon in my hands. Then they kill me if I try to protect my money from being stolen. Well, I don't like this at all. I generally believe that one should live by a certain principle. This principle was formulated by a hero from antiquity whom I greatly admire, who lived 100 years before Jesus Christ. His name was Hillel. And he phrased it this way: do not do to others what you would not want them to do to you. Well, that's the golden rule, isn't it? In every nation, in every religion. Even Jesus Christ later repeated it, slightly modifying the principle. I prefer Hillel's version more. Well, from my point of view, what Trump is doing today is strikingly reminiscent of living precisely by this principle. When he says, folks, our America, our country, it lived for a very long time without stealing money from those people who produce something and earn from it. For a very long time, she lived by the principle of let's collect money from other sources. Like, if someone wants to trade here, let's charge them a fee for the privilege of bringing their goods to us. But then you yourselves will end up paying more. Yes, we will pay more, but in return, we can produce things domestically and perhaps compete with them. And then people will buy our own products. Then our overall situation will be considerably better. That means if someone wants to buy from abroad, they should pay significantly more money. Those who prefer to buy locally, let them pay less, and so forth. So, Trump, from my perspective, is bringing us back to that very democracy. I don't particularly like that word. Just one more time. Actually, just so that people can clearly understand what I'm talking about, I'm using it. So, it returns us to that very democracy which the founding fathers had conceived, who based everything they spoke about on the treatise known as Common Sense, or Zdravi Smysl by Thomas Paine, a work that was written and truly changed America. The entire American Revolution is based on this. He called it a pamphlet, a 56-page pamphlet. And here's Trump. He's trying to bring us back, not into slavery, not into some kind of schmavery. He's trying to decentralize America, not to become a tyrant, but to truly decentralize America. That's why we're destroying. Well, let's just say, how dare he try to close the Department of Education? He simply wants to decentralize. He wants, on the contrary, not to consolidate power, but to distribute it, because all he truly wants is to live by the very principle that Hillel himself proposed 100 years before the birth of Christ. And he, Trump, who knows him, or maybe doesn't, but surprisingly, intuitively acts exactly that way. Not always, sometimes crudely, sometimes in a way I, for example, wouldn't act. But he sees the direction, he goes there, right? This is the man who, from my point of view, did more. You said he destroyed NATO. In your other speech, he didn't destroy it, he created NATO. He is not destroying America. He is not destroying the Republic. He is strengthening it, reinforcing it, and restoring it to what it was always truly meant to be. And that is, the individual is more important than any organization. The individual is more important than society. The individual is more important than the state. Those individuals who believe that society, a group, or other such entities are more important, they are typically Marxists, or perhaps Trotskyists, or Maoists, or some other similar ideology. They are, in essence, collectivists, and we would very much like to see them simply rot away. But in truth, we will not be the ones to do that. They will rot on their own, without us needing to assist them in any way.
Thank you, Leon. Alexander, a quick comment, if you can make it brief, please, because we have very little time left. I just want to remind our viewers and radio listeners that you are watching a debate on Radio Vera TV channel between Leon Weinstein and Alexander Goldfarb regarding Donald Trump's presidency. The topic of our debate this evening, I just want to remind you, is Trump or evil or a gift of fate? Alexander, please, your turn, and your final question will be?
Well, my comment is brief.
Thank you.
If we take Leon's speech, which I listened to with great interest, and then run it through, let's say, artificial intelligence, we could potentially identify the origins and fundamental components, so to speak, of this very ideology, which throughout the course of history, and particularly over the last 200 years, has consistently led to extremely tragic and regrettable consequences. I don't want to repeat myself. I simply wish to state that if this particular ideology and this, let's say, system of appealing to the masses prevails, then we will, broadly speaking, be confronted with an authoritarian regime, or to reiterate what I started with, we will be facing an ochlocratic regime, meaning the power wielded by demagogues and populists founded upon the brainwashing and deception of a great many people. I won't go into all the reasons for this right now, because we simply don't have the time. But this is my general feeling about what's happening.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And so we move to your final question for Leon.
My last question I'd like to ask Leon. Well, all right then, Leon, please tell me, how would you have reacted to the fact that after you arrived here from the Soviet... Oh, no, you actually came from Israel, just like I did, by the way. But that's not really important. When you found yourself here...
Alexander, I apologize. Leon's question is the last one now. Because you asked a double question. I apologize. Yes, that's my fault. So your question is actually the last, and we'll move on to an open discussion. Whatever time is left, that's what we'll have. Huh?
Do we still have an open discussion?
There's still an open discussion, but if we have time to get to it, yes.
Well, All right, I understand that regarding time, we'll only have room for, as they say, the closing argument. So let's attempt it this way. Now, during just 1 year of his presidency, Trump attracted to America, he brought to America $18 trillion in investments for U.S. industry. For comparison, under Biden, $1 trillion came in over 4 years. In the United States, car manufacturing plants are being constructed along with artificial intelligence centers and new power stations vital for high-tech industries. The United States has also begun to actively engage with cryptocurrency. We are constructing a protective dome similar to Israel's, but ours is a golden one. You see, we have a particular fondness for everything golden. So, we are exposing the advantages, you see, of China's naval power, let's just say. In the United States, inflation is decreasing and wages are definitely increasing. Inflation is decreasing, wages are increasing, that's 100% certain. Unfortunately, I could of course provide all the specific data, but it would simply take far too much time. Customs duties enable us to limit the import of goods the US is obligated to produce domestically, such as rare earth magnets and antibiotics. If we don't, China will choke us by refusing to supply what's essential for our military industry. Do you consider many high-paying jobs for Americans to be good for America, or do you think they are bad for America? Do you consider independence from China to be good for America, or do you think it is bad for America? Do you consider our protection from enemies to be good for America, or do you think it is bad for America? And if you truly believe that all of these things I've just mentioned are beneficial for America, then why is it that you never speak about them in your public speeches or during your interviews? Instead, you spend all your time just saying nasty things about Trump.
From this, one can conclude that you are, of course, for all good things and against all bad. But from what you said, I would say I introduced an element of doubt into all those assertions. Well, let's just take tariffs, for example. Tariffs don't lead to someone paying us any money, but tariffs only lead to an increase in prices for imported goods and for many other goods that are produced right here in the United States, which in general significantly increases the overall cost of living. If we're talking, for example, about us fighting China's rise, about us trying to overtake China, I'll give you a specific example from the latest statistics, which show that Chinese universities and higher education institutions, they have surpassed American ones in their ratings and the quality of scientific research produced there, because the Chinese are investing heavily in higher education. And Trump is imposing an absolutely crippling burden on universities, and is cutting funding for programs that are not in the humanities or social sciences, significantly reducing financial support for science, medical research, chemistry, physics, technology, and all the other related fields. And generally, universities are languishing. And this directly led to China already surpassing the US in many aspects of scientific and technological progress. So we can say many good words for all that's good and against all that's bad, but if we look at the results, at the cost of living, the US's global standing, its economic and political influence, all are declining. And I see no particular reason for optimism if this continues for another 1 or 2 presidential terms.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alexander. Lion, if you have a comment or a point, please feel free to speak.
Yes. Look, China has surpassed America in terms of its overall level. However, I still don't see the number of startups that would significantly exceed our own. And I haven't seen a single major discovery or groundbreaking invention that has originated from China. I don't see any Nobel laureates, or rather, perhaps there's one or two in science. I mean, I'm not talking about music or other fields, I'm talking about science. I simply don't see it. I review this matter constantly, and there are two countries that contribute about 80% of what develops the world. One country is called the United States of America, the other is Israel. Almost no one brings anything truly new to the world anymore. Nothing so fundamental that it would completely change things. All those inventions, all those groundbreaking discoveries that have occurred, they happen in the USA, not in China. So your, in general, as yet completely unproven assertion that China has somehow overtaken anyone, specifically the United States of America, I find quite strange. Now, the Chinese are a surprisingly uncreative people. From China in the last 100 years, well, after gunpowder, paper, and other things that happened 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, and it's not even known if they brought them from the Sumerians. Well, for the last 200 years, ever since Newton, let's say, propelled our Western science in a certain direction, nothing at all happened in China that one could say, oh, look, they've actually overtaken someone. Nothing of the sort. Perhaps in Confucius' time, but not anymore. Now, regarding the matter of tariffs, I must apologize for heaven's sake, but you're reasoning at a freshman's level. I strongly suspect that you are not an economist because, there was this Bastiat, a truly great man, an author who wrote an absolutely epoch-making work, which was called What is Seen and What is Not Seen. Everyone needs to read it from 5th grade, so to speak, from school to academics and the like. What is visible? What is not visible? Here you are talking about what is visible. You can see, can't you? I mean, how else? It used to cost 10. With a 2-unit duty, it became 12. Once it's imported, we now have to pay 12 plus profit instead of 10 plus profit. Yes, it's quite obvious that we're paying more. Now, what is not visible anymore? When we were paying 10, we simply couldn't manufacture it here. We couldn't possibly compete. But now, when we pay 12, we are able to compete. And penicillin will be produced right here in the USA. And automobiles will be manufactured in the USA. Because we told them, look folks, if you're going to bring your cars into our country, we're going to impose a 15 to 20% tariff on them. So, steel. We have restored our steel production. Do you understand what this implies? That China's dumping practices led to. You know what dumping is, right? It costs 100 to produce, but they were selling it to us for 97. Why? Because the Chinese government subsidized it. For what purpose? To completely destroy our steel industry. And it destroyed it. How can it be restored? Offer 20% profit, 20% duty for this. Now, whether they want to or not, 97 plus 20 is again more than what it costs to produce here. Last year, we already overtook Japan, the world's second biggest manufacturer. China is now number 1 because it has practically wiped out everyone else. We have surpassed Japan once more. And steel is absolutely essential. How could we possibly manage without steel? How could we possibly manage without tungsten? How could we possibly manage without antibiotics? We would suffocate tomorrow without rare earth elements. We cannot fight China right now because in the middle of a war, we would run out of rare earths. We wouldn't be able to fire at them. Corporations control all these rare earth metals. So what can be done? A basic duty, like a first-year student's math, was 10, now it's 12. That's more, that's one thing. But when you talk about national security, the health of the nation and so on, you suddenly realize that this 10 plus 2 equals 12 has nothing to do with the actual calculation. So, I apologize, of course, right? But what Trump said, that's a brilliant thing. There are actually a few brilliant inventions. One of them is insurance. Secondly, it's about the tariffs. These very things, they could bring us to such a wonderful state, us, America. I'm not speaking about the entire world at this moment. What exactly is happening in Honduras? I apologize, for God's sake. That's really not my concern. Exactly the same way, what is happening in Ukraine, also, generally, is not my business. I can sympathize, send money, collect for things, for helmets or body armor, which I did, shout, and so on. But ultimately, it's not my business, because I will not send my grandson there to fight, right? You know the difference, right? I won't send them. For America, I'll send them, but not there. That's not my business, that's their business. So, if you look at all of this on a surface level, without reading between the lines or understanding the situation, when there's something that we see and 1,000 times more that we don't see, if you're unable to think critically, I'm not accusing anyone right now. I'm just saying that, well, I have problems with music. I simply don't hear any music there. I love classical music, but I don't really hear it. Unlike my neighbor who says the second violin messed up. And I'm like, what? I didn't even realize a second violin was playing. Right? Well, these are different matters. I, with some understanding of the very core of political and general economics, say what Trump is doing is brilliant. And that people don't understand this, well, what can you do? For example, I do not understand how a refrigerator works, but I swear, I know for sure, I'll put a jar of mayonnaise in there, close it, and after a while it will be cold, and when you take it out, it stops being cold. And I don't care how it works. In the same way, most people do not understand how tariffs work, but they work and bring us jobs and security.
Thank you, Leon. Thank you, Alexander. I'm afraid we're running out of time. We probably don't have time for anything else. All that's left is to ask you. Well, it seems no one has convinced anyone naturally.
No, this conversation isn't about convincing each other. Conversations are about convincing someone or persuading someone who's listening.
Yes. You articulated that point exceptionally well. Yes. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to you, and primarily for the fact that you ultimately agreed and participated because, well, it must be said, debates, some individuals are not particularly fond of them. Somehow, they tend to steer clear of them. But I want to express my immense gratitude to you for...
And will we be allowed to have the last word?
Well, let's try if we can manage it, because you see, we actually only have about 10 minutes left. I just have a very big request. Let's stick strictly to the regulations. Perhaps we could even do 5 minutes each, if you don't mind.
Just completely. And such
Thank
as...
you. Yes, let's do that.
Last time Alexander started, it was like he was put in a more awkward position. You could say, I already had material when I started speaking. Well, come on, I can start.
If Alexander has no objections, let's go.
Listen, no, it's actually a plus for that. He will be the concluding, the finishing one. The final point will be his. Listen, all of today's propaganda is built upon one simple experiment, which was conducted in the early 50s by a certain Solomon Asch. So, they showed people lines of different lengths and asked them to say out loud which of the 3 lines matched the sample. There was always one real participant in the group. He didn't know about it. And a few decoy ducks, usually 9 decoy ducks and 1. And then he would sit last. By agreement, they would start giving an obviously wrong answer, but the same one. The control showed that when alone, people correctly responded in almost 99% of cases, meaning when no one else was present, they simply looked at it alone and answered correctly. But when everyone around started giving the wrong answer in unison, around 75% of the subjects followed the group and repeated the obvious mistake, even though they saw it was incorrect. In further experiments, where conformity, which is called conformity, noticeably decreased if there was at least one person in the group who answered differently from the majority, the subject noticeably and sharply reduced their agreement with the majority. That is, one dissenter broke the sense of unanimity, and the subject was much more likely to say what they really see and think. Similarly, the size and composition of the group had an impact. A larger group increased the response, meaning instead of 9, 20 people said, "Whoa, maybe I've gone crazy," right? Reducing the group from 9 to 3 led to a result where common sense prevailed. But these 3 people can be wrong. It is not 9. If it was necessary to respond, not publicly, but say on paper in a computer, then after listening to these 9 people, the 10th would sharply shift towards rationality. That is, he did not need to speak aloud and could quietly respond on the computer so that others would not see. He answered correctly, not how it seemed to him. Lastly, here and further, I will try to relate this to our situation. People with higher self-esteem were significantly more likely to remain independent. Now let's analyze what is actually happening right before our eyes and completely aligns with the repeatedly conducted experiment by Solomon Asch. You could be a great scientist or a janitor, be in the spotlight, or live in Diogenes' barrel. It may or may not affect your self-esteem. Very often, the self-esteem of a content turner is significantly higher than that of a nervous, constantly fluctuating self-esteem, built on momentary success or failure, of a world-famous actor who belongs to the class educated in school or university. And understand then, generally, that your social standing, your belonging to one class or another, does not determine your ability to withstand the pressures of the society in which you live. In artistic circles, universities, among journalists, psychologists, lawyers, and Marxists who went into education, I use the word Marxist or the term Marxism as a general concept that united a whole range of similar beliefs. But I must tell you right away that, you see, Karl Marx, for, if I'm not mistaken, 5 years, every single weekend, earning good money for it and seriously influencing the minds of young people, right here in New York, was published in a newspaper called the New York Herald, or for some time, the New York something, 5 years, every Sunday. So he definitely had an impact. So the Marxists, those who decided that the free market inherently punishes the weak, over 50 years of academic instruction and influence throughout America and Europe, emerged as the dominant, indeed, the leading intellectual force. And they truly led to this ideology, becoming the fundamental doctrine embraced by European and American intellectuals. Because collectivism cannot be logically explained, one of the Marxists' tasks, I say again, I use this word as a collective term, was to completely destroy critical thinking in Western education. At the same time, it is often said that they teach logic, critical thinking, and the ability to draw conclusions. But in reality, all they were striving for was to read, memorize, and not doubt, rather than analyze. A lot of our fellow countrymen, having arrived in a new environment, began to try to fit in and, so to speak, change their colors. We are very good at this, which we have proven over centuries. Therefore, even without undergoing formal training at American or European universities, a vast number of those who arrived here with us from the Soviet Union or from other countries where we had the profound opportunity to truly grasp and experience what collectivism actually means, we nonetheless completely cast aside that entire experience in order to fully integrate and become an essential part of this new society. Moreover, the more educated and liberal-minded this society was, the more left-wing it became. And, well, as I say, it was Marxist. The teaching, any deviation, I say naturally, ideologically, leads to ostracism. You're immediately thrown out of the community, out of life. You lose the opportunity to achieve what you're trying to achieve in the new society. So, many of us started to behave in a certain way, and then, justifying ourselves, we began to think that, well, this new society, to become a part of it, you had to think like this. I'm not saying that everyone is lying right now. No, they might actually be right, and then they realize they need to act in a certain way, and then they convince themselves that this is the right feeling and the right action. When it comes to Republicans, conservatives, or for instance Trump as a collective figure, instead of what the humanitarian society, says that, all of this is terrible. Those whom we call leftists or lefties, but they themselves don't refer to themselves that way. According to that very principle of Solomon Asch, when 9 people in their surroundings and people they want to be friends with, work with, from whom they want to get something they've always dreamed of, they believe that the only correct conclusion and worldview they should adhere to, well, so to speak, is that very collectivist one from which they, in fact, fled in the Soviet Union. These people despise those who did not betray their principles, even at the cost, perhaps, of their own well-being. People who continue to act based on morality and logic have always caused and continue to cause conformists to rage. That's it. I'm finishing up now. The so-called Trump derangement syndrome in reality is the consequence, well, let's say, of the fact that when people convince themselves that the only possible path forward is conformity, they fiercely hate those who prefer honesty over opportunism. I don't want you to think that I'm blaming anyone. No, on the contrary. I'm saying that some people get bitten by mosquitoes and others don't. And those who don't get bitten aren't necessarily better people than those who do get bitten by mosquitoes. 100 people might get sick with some kind of illness, like the flu, but the 101st won't. It's simply how the mechanism of his own body is structured. Perhaps in some cases he was lucky and in others he wasn't. A person who clearly sees one line is longer than another, but cannot bring himself to speak the truth. He cannot help but fall into a state of rage, because there is someone nearby who speaks exactly what they see. For this reason, we cannot argue with one another, because one portion of our society deeply hates the other, and the other side, in turn, despises those who have sold their souls. Furthermore, for those kinds of people who can't even remain in a discussion if they realize that all their words are merely emotions without any factual basis or confirmation. Therefore, they either run away or they start bringing up some emotional arguments that are not arguments at all. And then, in addition to that, there are also people who simply serve for money, which means they also serve for whatever they gain as a direct result of this service. That's why this person says things that, from my point of view, are completely illogical and contradict all common sense. Well, how can one belong to a movement changing from one sex to another, or say that a healthy 6'6" man, if he felt like a girl, has the right to go into showers with 15-year-old girls? Or, for example, play on a women's team, go into women's boxing, or shout that white people preferentially cannot get jobs at universities because that's racism. However, it is possible and even necessary to prefer black people or those who are sexually preoccupied simply because their sexual relationships are not with the opposite gender, but with the one they themselves belong to. All those who today are shouting that Trump is awful, that he's a detriment to the US, to America, yes, to the entire world, they unfortunately haven't entered, or rather, they regrettably have entered this psychological state where logic has long since ceased to operate. And despite this, they can be intellectuals, highly educated individuals, But unfortunately, this very test that we're undergoing, namely, there's no logic, we don't respond with numbers, we don't respond with facts, we respond and speak only with emotions, and throw all the... No, today it hasn't happened yet. It will definitely happen in the future. Why do I always talk about Cassandra, right? We are not Cassandras. In 1900, people thought one thing, but in 1920, a world war broke out, and everything became entirely different. We can't really predict things, can we? We can't assume. God disposes, right? So, what I want to say is that, unfortunately, to my immense regret, all my arguments with and why this gets under my skin so much, and I just want to, as they say, scream, why, what, how? Because no normal dialogue between that side and this one is ever possible. Because one side has facts, figures, and comparative data, while the other side, well, it will inevitably lead to something terrible. That's all. I'm done.
Thank you, Leon. Alexander, your final concluding word.
Well, I understand that our time has run out, so I'm here for you.
5 minutes. However, you do have them.
The only thing I can say is that everything we've heard in the last 5 minutes, in this, so to speak, monologue and sermon, can all be turned the other way. And Solomon Ash's experiment is equally applicable to the inhabitants of this very bubble. The one where it is located a significant portion of the Russian-speaking community here in America, and also a somewhat insignificant part of the MAGA movement. All these people are, to some extent, a confirmation of Ash's experiment, in that if you keep repeating all sorts of nonsense to them for a long time and refer to facts and arguments of unknown origin, they in the end begin to think in precisely the same way, because they are simply not capable of critically analyzing and comprehending what they hear. That is the entire problem. Therefore, I would simply take and repeat word for word everything that Lion has just said, but turning the entire pathos completely in the opposite direction. Now, therefore, I am of the opinion that it will not be possible to reach an agreement here. Indeed, I completely agree with that there are two irreconcilable positions, which perhaps cannot be resolved through simple compromise, but can only be settled by the recognition of a specific set of governing principles. And that framework is precisely what political democracy embodies, that there is, one might say, a particular set of regulations, and everyone makes use of them, and everyone strictly abides by them, and everyone is completely in agreement with them. Unfortunately, in my view, there is currently a noticeable tendency for these established rules. It is often said to be completely done away with, and for one's personal will to be forcefully imposed upon absolutely everyone who does not agree with your perspective. So this is my first comment on what we've heard. Secondly, I want to bring up something that, in my opinion, Churchill said about the Germans, somewhere in the midst of the Second World War, where he, so to speak, very succinctly characterized the essence of their disagreements with a very significant portion of the German population, many of whom were actively supporting Hitler during that particular period. The essence of this quote, if I'm recalling it correctly, is that these people don't actually need freedom. And the very sight of free individuals drives them into a rage. And I'm quite certain that Leon will twist this very same quote around and redirect it right back at me. But one way or another, from my perspective and understanding of the world, we are now facing the very real danger that people who have no need for personal freedom and who are infuriated by the sight of free individuals, that we will fall under their control in the coming years, with all the ensuing consequences, could become a reality. I suppose that's all I want to say.
Thank you so much, Alexander. Thank you very much, Leon, once again for your time, for your participation in our debates. I believe the debates were a success, so thank you all very much once again. And until our next meetings, I hope, perhaps not within the framework of debates, but simply, let's say, in joint conversations. Thank you all very much once more. I wish you all the best.
Did you understand any of that? I hope you enjoyed it. But more importantly, I hope something became clearer to you than it was before our talk. And now I have two questions. One, did you change your opinion, whatever it was, as a result of our argument? And two, whose argument seems more convenient to you? And I do not even mean arguments. I mean facts. I mean reasoning. I mean logic. Thank you very much for watching and listening. I'll be glad to read your comments and maybe hear what else you'd like to know, things I might be able to tell you about. I definitely have more experience with socialism than you do, though apparently there's already plenty of such experience in the United States too.